Thank you, David, for this really nice introduction and this opportunity from my side and from the side of my colleague Celia to talk about professionalizing data stewardship. Celia and I are both from the Dutch Tech Center for Life Sciences, and we're both working in the Dutch National Health RI infrastructure as well. And of course, as DTL, we represent the ELIXIR Netherlands node within the ELIXIR program. So happy to present all the different aspects and the projects Celia and I are involved in with regard to professionalizing data stewardship. We will first start with outlining a little bit of the need for skills and capacity building in data stewardship. So what is the reason to talk about, well, capacity building, training, skills for data stewards. And then we will point out some of our experiences in the Netherlands with regard to professionalizing data stewardship. So we will talk about the Dutch roadmap towards professionalizing data stewardship, about our efforts in data stewardship training, and well, the very important aspect of community building for data stewards as well. Then I'll hand over to Celia, and she will present on the ELIXIR Converge efforts with regard to professionalizing data stewardship and the efforts that are taken by the Dutch node. And of course, we will also talk about, well, further European players in the professionalizing data stewardship landscape. So that is the EOSC and the RDA, some of the RDA interest groups. And hopefully we still have some time left to include all of you in an active discussion with regard to your experiences on data stewardship. So next slide, please. So what is the urge and the need for talking about professionalizing data stewardship? Why do we want people who have specific skills, and why do we focus on capacity building in fair data stewardship? Well, we all know, of course, that data stewardship and data management skills are really essential in today's research, with the aim of, well, looking at open science, open data, well, all efforts around research, data management, and data stewardship. They are an essential part in data, well, in research. And without our help, well, I think at least research is a little bit less complete. But of course, there are some challenges. So if we want to organize data stewardship, specifically fair data stewardship, and if we look at the people who well, carry these tasks, it is clear that there is no straightforward consensus on the responsibilities and the task of those people that we refer to as data stewards. But of course, talking about data stewards, this also includes people like data managers, data analysts, data support staff, librarians. So this is a bit of a fake term, but in this presentation, we will use data stewardship. But it's really necessary to talk about what kind of tasks and what kind of responsibilities those data stewards will need to focus on. And ideally, we need to talk also about formalizing their, well, the profiles for those people. So that includes what kind of knowledge do they need, what kind of skills, what kind of abilities to really refer to proper data stewardship and proper data stewards in different organizations, locally and nationally. Moreover, there's also, well, too little, in some cases, no, or, well, not findable tailored education and training. So in the cases where there is training and education, it's in some cases hard to find, but there are also lots of local organizations who do not yet have resources, who can't find resources to educate and train their data stewards. And well, this lack of competences, overview of competences, and this lack of finding training and education, of course, hampers the adequate capacity building and also complicates efficient data management, as mentioned already, as this is really necessary for stimulating open science implementation. And we are convinced that national and international alignment and coordination is needed to achieve coherent training and education, combined with local and national HR policies with regard to data stewards. So data stewards need to be actually hired and have career perspectives. So what we did in the Netherlands, and which will be an example in this webinar today, we bundled our national expertise and manpowers of the different partners, and that explicitly also includes our research funders. So we have our research funders in the Netherlands on board with us, and with their help and with the help of various partners, as DTL, ELIXIR, and HealthRI, we are making steps to tackle fair data stewardship challenges. And this helps us to build a skilled workforce that is ready for professionalizing data handling. And our specific approach, and that is also part of the role, I'm a data steward community manager, we do it by the community and for the community. So we really need the help. We can't do it alone. We need the community to realize professionalizing data stewardship. So the next slide. So when we are talking about data stewardship, what kind of numbers do we actually talk about? How much capacity do we need? Well, we realize we have still a very long way to go. Based on previous reports, so for instance, numbers in the OECD 2020 report, but also based on the European Commission High Level Expert Group from the EOSC, there are estimations on the numbers of data steward and data steward capacity that we need worldwide. And we adapted in a Dutch project I'm going to tell much more about later on in the webinar. We need, well, we estimated that we need 3 full-time equivalent employment per 100 researchers. And that is really a lot. And it's built up, almost 2/3 of that, over 2/3 of that is built on data stewards who work locally and nationally to help researchers. But there's also a number of data stewards needed who work on specifically, who deliver training and work on developing training. So those 3 FTE per 100 researchers were, at least in the Netherlands, and I guess also worldwide, far away from those numbers. On the downs part of the slide, you see the result of a survey we had last year, and it's only a small survey because we didn't spread it out broadly yet, but the results very clearly show that in most organizations, from the 19 organizations that responded to the survey, there is only a little of them that have 1 FTE per 100 researchers. And what we are talking about is 3 FTE per 100 researchers. So we're still, we need to take a lot of steps to realize those numbers. Next slide. So in the Netherlands, we're taking those efforts. So I have on the slide, Celia, and I have on the slide an overview of the types of data stewards that we explained in one of the 2019 projects on professionalizing data stewardship in the Netherlands. And we made a distinction between 3 types of data steward. So we have the policy-oriented data steward, who is focused at the institute and at the policy in an institute. The research-oriented data steward, who is focused at the project and the research project. The research and the different research projects in an institution. And then we also have the infrastructure data steward, who is focused at e-infrastructure and specifically data in that perspective. This image that you see on the right, this landscape of data stewardship, is what comes from the 2019 report that I mentioned already, and we drafted out different matrices, and we also have a Zenodo community with all the output of the project, and you can find responsibilities and activities and the knowledge, skills and abilities and learning objectives for training for researchers in this very elaborate report and Zenodo community. And we've also implemented already the first responsibilities, activities, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and learning objectives in the EBI Competency Hub, which is a really nice tool with regard to different competency frameworks. And what we that is actually on the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about today is, no, if you could go one back, sorry. Is the NPOS F project, and we continued the efforts of the Zona W project that I just presented into the NPOS F project. And just to give a bit of background, there are more data steward frameworks. So if you're interested in different frameworks, then you should definitely check out the FAIR4S framework in the EOS pilot D7.5. The link is in the slides. And also the different frameworks that are discussed in the FAIR is FAIR D7.2 briefing on FAIR competences and synergies. So these are really nice overviews of different frameworks for data stewardship and different data stewardship competences. So definitely something to check out. Yes, the next slide, please. So with regard to the NPOS project, so what we did in the Netherlands, we reacted to one of the calls of a colleague of ours, so the president of CoFair and CoData, Barend Mons, who urged the need for, focused our efforts on realizing those 5% of research funds towards fair data stewardship. And he explains that if we realize those 5% if we realize those 5% data stewardship staff, then that we get an excellent return on investment. So it's really worth it, improves research. So that is the effort that we took in the NPOS project. And the NPOS project, NPOS stands for National Program Open Science in the context of the Netherlands. And within that program, there is a focus on open access publishing, on fair research data, and on corresponding evaluation systems in the Netherlands. And within that second program, optimal reuse of fair data, there are two side projects. So one project is our project, NPOS on data stewardship, and the second project, the second key area, is on the Dutch data infrastructure and services landscape. And as you will see later on, these efforts together, those two projects are together taken along in the current this year development of the NPOS program. So within open science, there are actually three dimensions. So the first dimension is the policy, regulation, and allocation of budgets, which is of course very relevant. If you don't have money to allocate data stewardship, then we won't get far. But there are also other elements. So one other element is, of course, the aspect of research infrastructure and services, as these are really important. And to realize the policy, regulations, and budgets, and the infrastructure and services, we need to realize a cultural change in research and research support community. So that is the efforts we are taking with the NPOS project. And in the NPOS project, we're pretty sure already that it won't be, it isn't a report that is just on the table of various policy, data steward, service providing people, but it is actually being carried out. The recommendations are being carried out by the people who are involved in the project, because we made sure that we had all the relative representatives of the universities, the university medical centers, the University of Applied Sciences, and different representatives of national Dutch service providers and umbrella organizations. So the recommendations are already taken forward. So the next slide, please. So you will recognize the second picture in this slide, on this slide. That is again this on MW report that I already referred to. And this report, together with another report on professionalizing data stewardship, are the foundation, the basis for the efforts taken in the NPOS project that I'm presenting on these slides. And you can find both reports. The links are included in the slide, and the right one, as explained already, is focusing on the three types of data stewards and their competences. And the left one is a report on from our National Coordination Point Research Data Management, and they pointed out three a little bit different aspects of data stewardship, which you do see, you recognize the similar basis. So they had a differentiation between a policy, strategy, and coordination-oriented data steward, and the different levels of embedding data stewardship. So it could be either at the embedded local level, the very operational level, but also at the generic, more advised level. So the right picture is more about, well, the personal perspective of data stewards, what kind of data stewards do we need to have, and the left picture is more about which is the place in the organizations that we need to position those data stewards. And those efforts are taken into the NPOS project. If you put on the next slide, David. I'm going to give an outlay of the NPOS project. If you click the link in the slide and read the preamble, the executive summary, and chapter 7, you get a great overview of the outline of the elements, the main elements of the report. But if you want to dive deeper into the report, chapter 1 and 2 will give an overview of international developments, the NPOS framework, the NPOS project, definitions of data stewardship, training, education, the 2 earlier projects. So that's a little bit of background. And then the next 4 chapters focus on the actual content of the NPOS project, which I will elaborate on on the next slide. So we have chapter 3 on the landscape analysis of data stewardship. We have chapter 4 on the job profiles for data stewards. We have chapter 5 on data-related training, and chapter 6 on a data steward skills tool. And chapter 7 has more higher level recommendations for specific stakeholders. So next slide. So this is an overview of the landscape analysis on training and education. We started with, looking at what the Dutch landscape looked like. And we have 8 case studies for universities, University of Applied Sciences, and university medical centers. And for all these case studies, we have, on the one hand, we have a profile for the data steward in that specific organization with their education, work experience, background, personality, etc. And on the right hand, we have what we refer to as case study reference cards. And in those reference cards, we highlight the elements of the case study. And those elements are divided into the position of the data steward in the organization. That's one element. The training that is offered for data stewards in that organization. The learning on the job of that specific organization, because not all training is taking place in formal training. There's also a lot of informal learning on the job. And then the strengths and challenges of the data stewardship in that organization. So you can find 7 more case studies in the report. It's really nice to check that out. So next slide, please. Based on this training and education landscape, we did some recommendations, and these recommendations also match the challenges and are combined with specific stakeholders that we address. So it's really nice to check out the sections in the report to further read on this topic. But what we recommend is that organizations use the case studies to plan a training, because there are excellent examples in the case studies. That is really important, and that was highlighted also in the case studies, that organizations need to care for their data stewards. And if you want to realize training, then local and national partners need to collaborate in that training to realize proper training for data stewards. And part of the training is also allow them time to involve in community and networking activities. Another aspect that was highlighted in the case studies is that a coordinated approach to data stewardship locally and nationally is really important. This needs to be organized very structurally in organizations. But on the other hand, we also need to make sure that there is enough flexibility in the job, because data stewards are a new area of expertise, and they are developing their job themselves as well. So we need to be flexible. And what is really relevant as well, as highlighted in the case studies, is that we need to position data stewards in the proximity of their peers. So data stewards learn from others in becoming better data stewards. So next slide, please. So the second chapter, the second content chapter, is about the job profile components of a data steward. So what we did, we drafted out various elements that organizations, Dutch organizations, but also international organizations could use to formalize the position of the data steward. We drafted out the domain areas, the responsibilities, the tasks, and the competences of a data steward. And what we did is for two different systems. One of those systems is the university systems. The second one is the systems of the job classification systems of the university medical centers. We drafted out, on the one hand, the basic components of what a data steward job should include. And in the second step, we also drafted out or actually reused existing data steward job profiles that organizations that didn't formally establish a job classification for data stewardship could reuse. So if you have already this formal position in place, that's, well, of course, the ideal. But if you want to reuse existing job profiles, we offer a lot of opportunity in our report to build on that as well. And the basic components of the data steward job profile that I'm talking about, so that's the one we use for our universities. And you can see in the picture on the slide, the different elements, so the different topics and also the different types of data stewards that we envision to be, well, the future of data stewardship in universities and in other organizations in the Netherlands. So you can see all the elements. It is about policy, strategy, compliance, good practices, services, infrastructures, etc. But it also encompasses soft skills and process improvement and coordination of work. So there's the hard side of those job profiles, but also the more soft skills part that is really important to data stewardship. And in addition to those, well, the basic components, the examples for the university medical centers, we also drafted out a job profile for the universities of applied sciences, as those universities indicated that data stewardship has a little bit of different position. So we have also drafted out that element and taken that into account. And what is also good to mention is that in the Netherlands, we have the context of the digital competence centers, which was a recent call by one of our main funders. And from that perspective, we not only focus on professionalizing data stewardship, but there's also the need to professionalize research software engineering. So we've also included a profile for the research software engineer to include that in any of the local organizations. So we offer a very nice broad overview of well, what's happening in the Netherlands. So the next slide, please. So built on this example, we could recommend organizations to formalize the profiles. Well, actually, the national partners to formalize those profiles, the local partners to adopt those profiles, and to create career perspectives for the data stewards. Of course, we also recommend them to allow the diversity of roles and types of data stewards and adopt good practices that are, highlighted in, among other, the case studies in our report. And what is also really relevant, we need to secure the positions of data stewards. So the next slide. The next topic is about training and education and certification of those training and education efforts. In the NPOS report, we did an inventory of training resources and a pilot annotation of courses based on the competencies that were just drafted out in the previous slide, or referred to in the previous slide. And we also did an inventory of existing certification mechanisms and for different categories. So we looked at courses, at trainees, at trainers, and at organizations. And we highlighted the importance of realizing certification for these different categories. And what we also realized is that this, at least in the Netherlands, but I think also in Europe, maybe worldwide, certification for data stewardship is still in its early days, and we need to align with activities in Europe and beyond, but we also need to align with different organizations to make sure that we create a certification mechanism that is useful for various countries and various domains and various contexts. So looking at the recommendations, of course, we need to start standardizing these metadata for training and make sure that we have proper annotation processes to make sure that not only data sets, but also training resources are properly annotated and also this way findable, made fair actually. And this is meant as a first start, at least in the Netherlands, but also within the ELIXIR Converge program, as Celia will talk about later, to create curated resources. And it's really important also to align with international certification initiatives, as already mentioned. And if you talk about international certification initiatives, it's also important to talk about who should take care of that certification process. So there should be organizations, providers that take care of this element of certification. And this all, of course, has the ultimate goal of collaborate locally and nationally in organizing training and development of certified curricula. So that is what we in the end want, a good curriculum for data stewardship. So next slide, please. So the last element is the Data Steward Skills Tool. All the elements that I highlighted, ideally you want them to be included in a single point of reference for data stewards, where they can find competences, training and education resources that help them to professionalize. And in the report, we've drafted 5 data stewardship personas, and we've drafted out how data stewards could benefit from such an ideal tool. And we've drafted out the pathways for these personas in such a tool. And we already took a first step in collaboration with the already mentioned EBI Competency Hub tool. We've included some of the elements already in the Competency Hub. And it's really nice to see that the Competency Hub is interested to expand their tool for our use case and made the adaptations that are needed in the NPOS-F project. So we have recommendations for this as well. So of course, continue the Competency Hub integration, but also organize a committee of stakeholders for the development process and a working group for the content of such a digital tool. And then again, we need to talk about ownership of such an inventory and such a tool. So next slide. So this is the final slide about the NPOS-F project. So you can find a summary of recommendations. I've drafted that already out in the previous slide, but this is a high overview of the recommendations. And we've already have taken first steps to implement the recommendations in one aspect, that is the Dutch NPOS 2021-2030 Fair Data program. So we're organizing fair data tables with all relevant stakeholders to talk about implementation of the NPOS-F project in local and national organizations. We've, as mentioned already, taken steps to include most of the elements in the EBI Competency Hub, and we've taken the competency framework and our recommendations along in various Dutch training efforts. And what we're really happy about is that one of our formal job classification systems, the one for the university, is very willing to take on our basic job profile for data stewardship, and hopefully it will be included in the August version of job classification system, and similar discussions are ongoing with regard to the other job classification systems. So the next slide. So with regard to training, this goes a little bit beyond, I've mentioned it already, goes beyond the NPOS-F project. We've taken the recommendations already along in our HELIS Academy course on fair data stewardship. We've given 3 editions in 2019, again in 2019, and the last one in 2021, which included the recommendations of the NPOS-F projects already with regard to the competencies that we want ideally see for data stewards. And we're working with the Italy and Sweden ELIXIR nodes to organize a similar course in their country. We've given in 2019 also with a more technical data stewardship course. And previous year, we focused on, data stewardship training for 2 Marie Curie ITN early career researcher courses, which offers great materials for others to reuse as well. So please browse the materials and reuse any of the materials you can use. And what we've also done is include all the data stewardship efforts into our COVID-19 projects in the Netherlands, which are a collaborative effort of GoFair, HealthRI, and our own organization, DTL. And we're again working there with the national funder, so Son W in this case, to make sure that in the projects the fair data requirements are met, and actually also in all projects formal data stewards are included. So a lot of efforts going on with regard to training in the Netherlands. So the next slide. So this is the final element of my part of the presentation. So all the efforts are also partly focused on professionalizing, focused on training, but also on the community building. So we're doing a lot of efforts to realize the community and networking aspect of professionalizing data stewardship. So we have 2 main groups in the Netherlands. We have more groups, but 2 groups that we are heavily involved in. One is Data Stewardship Interest Group, and we have a very active Slack channel. So if you are a data steward and curious about this Data Steward Interest Group, it's open for international collaboration as well. So make sure to check out the link and join the Slack channel, and you're welcome to join our meetings as well. And this is quite a big group already who exchange a lot of efforts and experiences in data stewardship. And then the second group is more health oriented, which is the data stewardship community within HealthRI, our health infrastructure. And in that perspective, we facilitate data stewards in the health domain to work together and realize fruitful collaborations. And these efforts are all focused at not reinventing the wheel locally, but work together nationally to professionalize data stewardship. So now I'm going to give the floor to Celia, who's going to present more on the European and global aspects of professionalizing data stewardship. So Celia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maaike. David, can you give me the next slide, please? Okay, so from the Dutch landscape, we are now changing to the European one. And I want to talk a little bit about Converge. Converge is a European project which is focusing on connecting and aligning all the ELIXIR nodes to deliver a really fair life science data management program. And we have 4 objectives in Converge. The first one is to really develop a model for transnational data management support in the life sciences. The second one, very tightly attached, of course, with the training, is to strengthen the capacity in data management. We want to align the national data management standards and services by building a toolkit, and also to align national investments to drive local impact and the global influence of ELIXIR. I have put the schematic picture of all the work packages on the bottom left, but I want to focus your attention to the bottom right, because there we have the 3 work packages that for us form the core of ELIXIR Converge. We have the work package 1, which is about the people, the European-wide network of the data management experts. We have the work package 3, which has built the shared toolkit, the RDM kit. And we have the work package 2, which is about skills and training. Next slide, please. So how is ELIXIR Converge contributing to the professionalization of data stewardship? Because that is, of course, the focus of the webinar today. So you see here 2 screenshots from the RDM kit, which was launched end of March. And on the bottom left, you see the URL. So Work Package 3 has led the effort to develop and implement the RDM kit, but many work packages, in fact, we think it's like a collaborative outcome. So all the work packages have worked together with Work Package 3. And for instance, Work Package 1 has been very active into capturing and collating all the expertise that is in the nodes. Work package 3 has been involved in both technical but also editorial and content issues. And there have been several content creating hackathons where the best practices for the data management have been brought in by the work packages 1, 2, 3, and 5. And for the work package 2, which I will tell a bit more in a second, that is our work package for training and capacity building, we have been responsible for adding the proper persona or data stewardship roles in the RDM toolkit. And you see the picture on the left. Then you may recognize the 3 data stewardship roles: policy, research, and infrastructure that Maaike showed before. And also we have been working to connect the training portal tests of ELIXIR to the RDM kit, will allow us to actually make the bridge from the toolkit to relevant trainings for specific aspects of the toolkit. Next slide, please. In work package 2, which is called Training and Capacity Building and Data Management and Data Stewardship, with the tagline actually, Data Management Training by the nodes for the nodes. So we are working in Work Package 2 with 22 countries together, and together our objectives are here. We are building a comprehensive and interconnected and sustainable training and capacity building program. In that process, we connect the European training activities also to the national roadmaps, the training maps of the nodes. And together we aim to establish a really high level of data management and data stewardship expertise and knowledge in ELIXIR. Next slide, please. So work package 2 is, I think, what we are doing as we are defining, building, and delivering the training portfolio and the roadmap. And that means that we are designing courses, developing course materials, amongst others by dedicated hackathons, and delivering courses. The courses are for different audiences, for data stewards, for researchers, for tool developers, and for trainers. And what's important to note, I already mentioned on the previous slide, this is in alignment with the node priorities and the national strategy. So it's an additional added value that we're trying to achieve. And of course, work package 2 is not working in a silo. We have connections with all the other work packages. Until now, the project started February 2020, and until now we have done 24 training events by 11 countries. So the first trainings have been delivered, and there has been a training gap analysis, which indicated really the topics that are currently in a need of making new and additional training materials. And our next steps for the coming period is really to make this happen in specific training material generating hackathons, and together work towards this ELIXIR data management training portfolio. Another thing that we're working on is it's also to do with capacity building, is to work on a train the data stewardship trainer course, because we need many more people who will be able to train the data stewards, because Maaike has already told you how many data stewards we will need in Europe and beyond. Next slide, please. Okay, besides the things related to designing and building and delivering the courses, there's also a lot of work going on in the back end, or so I have called it groundwork here. And we need to do this because we need to build the materials. We want to make them part of a learning path. We want to annotate them properly so that we can register them in the test registry so people can find them and they are discoverable. And for that, groundwork is needed. And I've put 3 examples here. One thing is that we have been working in the biohackathon in 2020 towards a learning path for data management and data stewardship. This is the next step. It is kind of to bridge courses and make a trajectory for a person who's looking for training to say, oh, first you do this, and then you go to that course, and then you go to that course, and then in the end you are a professional data steward. The second bullet is the competency framework that Maaike already has discussed in detail. And of course, that is one of the basic parts on which you then can build trainings to achieve these competencies. And the third thing is that we are working towards a standardized vocabulary. And we're doing this together with the EDAM developers and with the Terms for Fair Skills project group. Those are both ontologies that we want to use, either we are already using in terms for skill we want to use in, for instance, in tests to annotate our trainings. But there is currently no standardized vocabulary for fair and for fair skills. So that's why we started out on this adventure. Next slide, please. Leaving ELIXIR now and going to the EOSC, which is the European Open Science Cloud. It's being built at the moment, and its aim is to offer researchers really a virtual environment where they can find open and seamless access for storage, management, analysis, and reuse of their data. So this is really outside the life science domain. It covers all the domains. Last year, the EOSC Executive Board had a number of advisory groups, and one of them was the Working Group on Skills and Training. And this working group has published their report in February. And from ELIXIR, we had the following people participating. So Fotis from Greece, Anna from Portugal, and I from the Netherlands. We were in the group as national representative for our country, but of course we also put on the ELIXIR Europe hat. And Vera from EBI was participating in the group on behalf of EOSC Live. ELIXIR Training Platform was also interviewed as a competence center. Next slide, please. So there are 4 priority areas in the report of the EOSC Skills and Train Working Group. And one is about developing the next generation of fair and open science professionals. And there is a framework of EOSC actors that has been defined. I will show that in a minute. Then there is the concept of competence centers that is introduced, how we can collaborate towards enhancing the digital skills that are needed. The third thing is that there is a recommendation, and it's already going to be built, an EOSC federated training catalog, because people who are looking for training need to find a trusted place where they can find the materials, the courses, or a route to their materials and their courses. And the final priority recommendation is about recommendations for the member states, how they can really add this in their policies and strategies. And we have made recommendations for 5 groups of stakeholders. You see them on the top right, for policymakers, for universities and research organizations, for competence centers, for the association, and for the EOSC projects. So this is a report if you want to know more about the background and the European recommendations. Next slide, please. So here are the 10 EOSC roles. The data steward is also one of them, but there are more. And each role in the report has described a situation example and the skills needed for that role. So that might be also interesting for you to check out. Next slide, please. This is one final thing that we want to showcase related to the Dutch and the ELIXIR work. So we have been asked to feature as a use case together with Denmark in the skills chapter for the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda of the EOSC, the SRIA. So we have been asked because we are kind of together with Denmark, who is more working on university education in data stewardship. And we are working more in training related data stewardship. And together we are kind of at the forefront in our approaches towards implementing fair data stewardship. And so we were very proud that this became part of the SRIA. Next slide, please. This is the final slide. So now we're going even further because the RDA, the Research Data Alliance, of course, is a global organization. And there are many interest groups, and we have highlighted 2 here who are specifically working with data stewardship, and Maaike is co-chairing both of them. So the first one is Professionalising, the data stewardship interest group, and you see on the left the topics that they're working on job profiles, on training, on business cases, and on career tracks. And then on the right, you see the education and training on handling of research data interest group, which has an unpronounceable abbreviation if you use all the letters. But this group is working more on training resources, inventory, but also talking about identifying minimal metadata to annotate learning resources endorsed by the community. We have to annotate our trainings, but of course we want to do it with a method that we all use, because otherwise it will get us nowhere. Both groups are open for your participation, so please check out the webpage or the Slack, which might even better, because then you will end up immediately in the discussions that are going on in the groups. Next slide, please. This is our acknowledgement slide. We were starting out with a slide of names, and then we found out it was virtually impossible to put all the names here. So we have put the links, all the relevant links to the Converge people, to the Terms for Fresh Skills, to the NPOS team, and to the RDA groups, and to the Datastored Interest Group. And you can find information about them there.